Welcome to this big picture course about ChatGPT and generative AI. You've probably seen the headlines. Everybody is obsessed with this mind-blowing ChatGPT AI chatbot. It's the hot new thing in tech right now, grabbing the interest of investors and causing an explosion of other AI-based companies and products. It's kicked off an arms race of sorts, and its popularity has even surprised the folks at OpenAI who created it. And it's already set several records for user adoption. Just to give you some concrete numbers on that last point, to reach 100 million active users, it took Instagram 30 months, or about 2.5 years. For TikTok, it took 9 months. ChatGPT hit 100 million active users after just 2 months. It's really pretty incredible. Some people are calling this the iPhone moment of our time, or the internet or email moment of our time, that it's going to change everything. So you definitely need to understand it and get ahead of the curve with this one. But what exactly is ChatGPT and generative AI more broadly? How does it work? How can it be used? And how can you use it in your job? In this short course, we'll answer those questions and give you some practical tips for how to take advantage of this exciting new technology. Let's start with some terminology. Generative artificial intelligence, or AI. This is any type of AI that can be used to create new text, images, video, audio, code, or synthetic data. Let's see some examples. DALL-E is another AI product created by OpenAI, and this will generate images for you based on descriptive text that you provide. Let's say we want an oil painting of a cat in space with a cup of coffee. Let's see what we get. And ta-da, there we go. There's our cat in an oil painting style. Or maybe something a little bit more relevant to real life. Let's do a photo of a man wearing a t-shirt, walking in a city, looking at his phone. And there we go. So a really great example of generative AI for images specifically. There are also tools for audio and music. Here's just one example, Ecret Music. Let's say we need a specific soundtrack for a video we're creating or a game or something like that. So maybe we want to do travel is our scene. It should be a happy mood. And for genre, let's go with cinematic. And we'll say create music. And here's some brand new music based on the input that we've entered here. We can also adjust things like the tempo, maybe bump that up to a 1. We can change the melody, backing, and a lot of other things here. Okay. So those are just a couple of examples. There's tons and tons of these tools that are popping up everywhere using AI to create new or novel content. So that's basically what generative AI is. I do want to spend just a second contrasting that with another type of machine learning or AI that you might be familiar with that's used pretty extensively today, and that's discriminative AI. This type of AI analyzes or categorizes existing data. It can solve problems like determining if a transaction is fraudulent. So you feed in data like a merchant, amount of a transaction, where the transaction took place, for example, and this type of model can tell you that yes, this looks like fraud, or no, it doesn't. Or image recognition is another common example, like recognizing handwritten digits. We input a handwritten 2, we iterate through various layers of that to pick up the patterns in that number, and then we say, aha, that looks like a 2. So again, just analyzing or categorizing existing data. That might be what you're thinking about when you think AI or ML, but generative AI is a whole new category that's creating or generating new novel content. Now that we know what generative AI is broadly, let's talk about ChatGPT specifically. It's perhaps the most popular example of generative AI today. If you're curious, it stands for Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer. It's a language model that interacts in a conversational way, meaning you can ask it questions and get human-like answers. It's a super smart chatbot, basically. It's developed by a company called OpenAI, and the current version is 3. Let's see some examples of what it can do. How about explain calculus for a 5-year-old? And here we're going to get a very human-like answer written in a level of detail that somebody very young, a 5-year-old, could understand. Let's try another one. Write a short paragraph explaining the history of computer science. And we can say things like use a friendly tone. Let's see what this gives us. And here, just like we've asked for, we have a short paragraph about computer science in a pretty friendly tone. So how is all of this possible? ChatGPT is trained on a massive, massive data set, basically scraping the web and learning from all kinds of data, things like news articles, research papers, books, documentation from software or user manuals, sites like Wikipedia, scholarly articles, and a lot more. So all of that data is fed in to train this model to make it really smart. But what exactly does that mean? How do you train a computer? Well, kind of the same way that you quote-unquote train a human. Thinking back to when you were a kid, you were learning the alphabet and spelling and such. You learned the letters, lowercase, uppercase. You learned how to recognize them, how to write them, how they sounded, and eventually you put them together to mean something. Basically, you identified patterns, which is what machine learning or AI does. For example, if I see the letters like this, A, M, B, E, I have learned, or I've been trained to think, oh, I bet the next letter in this sequence is an R, forming a complete word, amber. And you can extend from letters and single words to full sentences. If I see the text, I hope this, since I've seen that so many times, I've learned or I'm trained to want to complete this sentence with finds you well. And ChatGPT basically does the same thing, but on a much larger scale, having been trained with a lot more information than a single human brain. It's super, super smart. So it's taking all the information that's been fed to it and basically predicting what word or sentence or paragraph or line of code, for example, would come next. And that's an important point. ChatGPT doesn't do an internet search for answers. Instead, it predicts answers based on its training data. So this is not a new search engine, though some people would argue it could become that, replacing the popular search engines that we have today. But under the covers, it's not actually doing a search. It's just using the data that it was trained on to predict what comes next. So let's do a quick recap before we move on. ChatGPT is a language model used for human-like conversation, a really smart chatbot, essentially. It's a type of generative AI that creates new content. It's become massively popular in a very short amount of time with the potential to disrupt how we work, learn, and interact. It's definitely a technology you want to understand and know how to use for your benefit. And that's where we're heading next. Let's talk about how to get started with ChatGPT. Hi everyone, and welcome back. Let's dive into ChatGPT and see how to start using it. First, how do you actually interact with ChatGPT? At the moment, the browser is the only option by going to chat.openai.com, which is what we'll do in just a minute. It's super easy to get started. At the time of this recording, OpenAI does not have an official app for ChatGPT that you can use on your phone or tablet. But if you go out to your app store, you'll see there's tons of third-party apps out there that have already sprung up, many of them that have a cost associated. I wouldn't recommend using these, even though most are probably legit apps that use the OpenAI APIs on the back end. To use the official ChatGPT, just go to your browser and get started there. Navigate to chat.openai.com and then go to Sign Up. This will require you to sign up using an email address, and then there's also a phone verification required, so you do need to enter a valid phone number. I won't go through the full wizard here since I already have an account, but there's really just a couple of steps that's quick and easy to set up. As far as pricing goes, the free version is available to everybody and gives you full functionality. So if you signed up for an account just now, you'll have full access for free. At the moment, you may experience some lags in performance during peak times, and sometimes it just says that it's not available at all because it's overloaded. I suspect that over time this will get better as they ramp up resources to handle the popularity of this, but just know that that can happen occasionally. When it's happened to me, I just give it a minute or two or refresh the page and everything works fine. And then as of the time of this recording, there's a plus version that's coming soon. Pricing will be $20 per month, and it'll give you better response times and performance during those peak times that we just talked about. You'll also get access to new features as they get rolled out. You can't actually sign up for this version yet, but you can put yourself on a wait list. If you go out to this blog here and scroll down, you'll get a little bit more information about what's in this plan. And then you can click the link here to sign up on the wait list and be notified when this new plan is available in your country. Now let's go see some of the ChatGPT capabilities in action. We'll go through conversations and how it can remember things within a conversation, and then we'll also see how to provide corrections and feedback to help it get better. Let's start by using conversation and memory to create a game. We'll say, create a text game. The game uses characters and scenes from Lord of the Rings. My initial score is 0. The game asks me math questions with 4 options to choose from. When I get an answer correct, it adds 5 points to my score, and then asks me a new question. So let's get this one started. As we do that, you'll see a new chat has appeared on the top left there. And once it generates the full answer, it'll automatically fill in a name. So it's giving us LOTR Math Quiz Game. You can always edit that, though, by clicking on the pencil icon if you want a different name, and you can also get rid of your previous chats using the trash can icon. We're good with that, though, so let's see what we have here. Welcome to the Lord of the Rings math quiz. Your starting score is 0, and then we get our math question. So what is 7 plus 4? Correct answer is going to be number 1, so we'll input that. Hit enter, and then it should give us the next question. Correct, yay! Score is now 5. So it's remembering our score, and it also knows what the 1, 2, 3, and 4 represent at a particular point in this conversation. So our next question, what is 10 minus 6? That's going to be 4, which is answer number 1, and so on and so forth. So I think a really good illustration of how memory works within a chat or a conversation. Let's see another example of how we can build on a conversation. For this one, we'll say, generate 10 ideas for blog titles about the importance of using source control in software development. Now, I've just stayed within the same chat or conversation here. You could start a new one for every new topic. But for this one, we should be able to reference something in this list that it just gave us and have it expand on that using the new instructions that we give it. So let's say we really like the title of the third item, Source Control, Protecting Your Code from Disaster. We can say, write an outline for the third idea, and it should recognize what idea we're talking about. And here it gives us a rough outline that we could take to structure our blog post. Everything from the introduction, getting into specific topics, and then a conclusion at the end. We can continue building on this by saying, write an introduction for the blog post in a friendly tone. And it should recognize the blog post that we're talking about was the third one in the list. And it's written a nice introduction for us in a friendly, conversational tone, something that we could use as inspiration to get started on our post. Next, let's see how we can provide corrections to refine the answers that we get, and also how to provide feedback so it can improve over time. Here we're going to generate some new data. So create a sample data set of product sales by state, use 10 products, include product name, price, sales date, and sales representative. And here's our sample data set. Now, we didn't specify the format of the data that we want here, so it's just giving us a table. Let's say we need this as a CSV, though, a comma-separated value file instead. So we'll say format the data as CSV, not a table. There we go, now we have the right format. Let's say we want a little bit more variety and creativity in some of our data, though. So we'll say, please use more variety and creativity in the product names. Certainly. Here's a sample data set with more creative product names. There we go. And you can go back and forth like this to get more variety in the other data if you want it, for example. But let's say there's something that you're trying to correct. Let's say the state for the EcoWatt product is incorrect. It should be Arizona. Now, obviously, that was not incorrect because this is just sample data, but you'll see that it fixed it here. Now we've got Arizona for the EcoWatt product. If you do legitimately spot something incorrect in an answer, though, you can always correct it to get a more accurate or more complete answer. Sometimes ChatGPT will even apologize when you do this, which is a fairly human-like behavior and kind of funny when it happens. You can also give feedback using the thumbs up or thumbs down button here. So every time you get an answer, you can basically tell ChatGPT how it's doing. So if we really did get something wrong, we can just click this and then provide additional feedback on what the correct answer should have been. You can also flag things as harmful, unsafe, not true, or not helpful. So it's learning over time and improving, and this is part of how it does that. So we've seen some basic capabilities. But it's not perfect, so let's talk about some limitations and things to be aware of as you're using it. We'll talk about the recency of the data it was trained on, how it can give incorrect answers, and then how it handles biased or inappropriate questions and answers. Starting with the recency of data, it's only been trained on data through the end of 2021, so that could be an issue depending on what you're asking for. For example, if we say research trending keywords for travel to South Africa in the last 3 months, it will actually tell you that it doesn't have access to real-time data. Sometimes it will also tell you specifically that it doesn't have data past 2021, but that is what it's currently trained on. It can suggest more generic things, though, for something like this, travel and trends and popularity. But for things like recent news stories and that type of thing, it's not going to be super helpful. Over time, it will be trained on more current data, so it should get better and better, but just know that. Let me open up a new chat here. And over here on the right-hand side under limitations, you see it may occasionally generate incorrect information. As we've already said, ChatGPT is constantly learning, getting smarter, and providing more accurate answers. For example, when I first started using it, I asked it to generate some Excel formulas for me and some code snippets that I could use in Amazon Web Services. There were some mistakes in both of those, but when I reran them today, they actually seem to be correct. There are several examples online of where it gets word problems incorrect or complex math problems wrong. So it's only going to be as good as the data it was trained on. Keep that in mind. You are ultimately responsible for ensuring the accuracy and appropriateness of the answers. And then finally, as it says here, it can occasionally produce harmful instructions or biased content. This is also an area that's constantly improving. So if I were to say, how can I rob a bank? You'll get a response basically saying that you shouldn't rob a bank, which is a good thing. So it'll try to keep things on track. And no illegal advice given. Excellent. And then back to a new chat again. There's also been a lot of work to remove bias that was identified in some of the early responses. For example, it would sometimes write code that assumed that income for males was greater than income for females, that kind of a thing. So it's getting better in that area as well. Okay, let's quickly recap the important points we've covered before we move on. Using ChatGPT is really quick and easy to do in your browser. Just go to chat.openai.com. At the moment, there's no official app from OpenAI, though you will find lots of third-party apps out there. The free version gives you full functionality, though you may experience some lag at times. A paid Plus version is coming soon for $20 per month, and it should make that better. ChatGPT has memory within a conversation, so you can refine and correct the answers that you're getting until they're just right. As we've talked about, there are some limitations, though, so make sure you're verifying what it gives you, and ultimately, you're responsible for the accuracy and appropriateness of what you're using. All right, I think we can all agree that ChatGPT is pretty cool, but let's see how it can be applied in the real world and how you might be able to make your job easier by using it. Welcome back, everybody. We've seen some really cool things that ChatGPT can do, and I'm sure you're already thinking of some other things to try. But beyond games and math problems and trivia questions, how else might you use this in the real world and in your job? To get some ideas, let's first talk about the OpenAI APIs, or application programming interfaces, at openai.com/API. Using these APIs, you can integrate all of this great AI functionality into your own website or app. And not just for ChatGPT, but other services like DALL-E that we saw earlier for images. If you scroll down, you've got some getting started and documentation here, and some examples of what you could do. All the way down at the bottom, you'll also see some very popular applications that have been built with these APIs, things like GitHub's Copilot product that helps you write code, and Duolingo for language translation. So ChatGPT itself is pretty cool and all, but to really harness the power of this generative AI, these APIs are where it's at. So let's look at some specific ways that you could apply these. Starting with customer service chatbots. These have been around for years, but in my experience at least, there's a lot of room for improvement. ChatGPT itself can be thought of as a chatbot, but you can also customize it and use it for your own applications, making it your own super smart chatbot for your own needs. Virtual writing assistants. Here again, you can incorporate this into your own site for your customers, or you could just use it directly in the browser. If you're hunting for a job, maybe you get some help creating your resume cover letter. Give it some information about the job you're looking for, the kind of experience you have, and that you're really excited to work for this company. And let's see what we get. Okay, and here's a boilerplate letter that you could take and customize, highlighting your coding boot camp, your experience, your internship, and how you're really excited about this position. Definitely a good starting point. Language translation is another really popular use case. We can give it a phrase or a paragraph or an entire story and say that we want to translate it into another language. So there's how I would order my croissant and black coffee if I were in France. And finally, you can use this to generate creative content, things like stories, poems, songs, and so on. So how about write a limerick about learning how to program? And here we have a poem about Ted learning how to code. Pretty impressive. We just covered some broad applications for ChatGPT and generative AI, but let's look at some more specific use cases for folks who work with data in their day-to-day jobs. Starting with automation, this can mean a lot of different things depending on your job, but for me, there's some low-hanging fruit that comes to mind, things like formulas and exact syntax of your code. For example, in Microsoft Excel, I vaguely recall how to use the VLOOKUP function, but I can never quite remember the syntax, so I could ask ChatGPT to write an Excel formula that looks up values in column A that match values in column B. And here I get the VLOOKUP, along with an explanation for how this works and what parameters go where. Regular expressions or regexes are also super tedious to me. I can never remember them, so we could get some help with that. Write a regex that fits a US phone number. Here we get the regex, we could copy that code into our code, and then an explanation of how this works. Content creation is another area where you could use ChatGPT. We've seen some of this already with the blog posts and such, but in day-to-day life, maybe it's something like an email. So write an email to my boss that asks for feedback on a deck I created. The deck is just a draft and was created based on notes from last week's meeting. Use a relaxed tone, and include a joke. Let's see what we get here. Okay, here's our email. We've got a subject line, describes that we're looking for feedback on the deck from last week's meeting, and we even have a joke in here about salad dressing. So obviously something you would want to update to match your own tone, but if you don't like writing emails, this might be a good accelerator for you. Another way to use this is to write code, all kinds of code. We're going to go back to an example we were using earlier. I've got it in a different chat though, so we'll have it regenerate a sample dataset for us, and then ask to write a Python script to analyze the data, remove outliers, and then visualize the sales price using a histogram. Okay, here's our data set. You'll see the format it's given us is CSS. We might actually want this in a CSV format or something. We saw how we could refine that earlier. But then down here is the sample Python script, complete with code comments and everything to read in the data, calculate things like the mean and the standard deviation of the sales price, remove outliers, and then visualize using a histogram. So you could grab this code, copy it, put it into your own code base, modify it, run it, whatever you need to do. So again, a really nice starting point. You also get a description down here of what's happening. That was Python. You can also use this for things like SQL statements. So we'll say write a SQL statement to select these columns from the customers table, and then order by last name and then first name. And here's our SQL statement. And then the fourth use case is around your daily workflows. That again could mean many different things, but maybe you spend a lot of time trying to figure out other people's code or how to refactor code to make it better. Let's see if ChatGPT can help with that. Let's say you've taken over somebody else's code and you want a brief summary of what it does. So we're going to say, what does this code do? We'll paste in the code. And here we go. This code is a Python script that creates a Lambda function in Amazon Web Services using the Boto3 library. It goes through the various lines, tells us what's happening here, and how it would be triggered. Now, let's say you wanted to make the code better, or refactor it to make it more readable and concise. You also wanted to add some code comments. And voila, here's the refactored version. We've got some code comments saying it's more readable and concise. This particular example didn't have a ton of updates to it. But you can imagine if you had some really bloated spaghetti code, that kind of thing, ChatGPT could have a go at it and hopefully improve things for you. And then finally, as part of your daily workflow, maybe you're trying to decide between different technologies or different approaches. So let's ask about popular technologies for exploratory data analysis, get some pros and cons and some examples of how I might use them. Okay, we get two options here. One is pandas. We've got pros and cons for that. Second one is matplotlib, pros and cons there, and then some examples of what you can do with them. So hopefully with just this short demo, you realize just how powerful this is and all the different ways you could use it in your day-to-day job. It's really pretty amazing. In summary, while ChatGPT can be used for a lot of fun and kind of trivial things, it also has very real practical applications out there in the world, and especially for technology jobs, whether it's writing code or automating tedious processes. So use it to get answers, to get you started, or to validate something that you're already thinking about. And with that, let's wrap up and talk about a few things that you can do next. First, I would say just go try it. You probably already have tons of ideas for how you could use ChatGPT, so just go give it a try. You can learn a lot just by using different prompts and seeing what kinds of answers you get. This is a very fast-moving and exciting space that will likely change quickly, so keep an eye on the blog at openai.com for the latest announcements and features. And then let me know how things are going. Go to the discussion tab for this course, drop me a note about all the cool things that you're learning, and also please let me know how I did on the course by giving it a rating. And with that, I'll say thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it helpful, and I wish you all the best in your ChatGPT and AI adventures.